Okay, so welcome to the Happy Mindset Show, episode number 1. Today's episode is entitled Staying in My Own Lane. And today I want to discuss and talk and explore around the idea of how me being selfish can actually lead to a more fulfilling and happy life for myself and then for others. So with me today I have a guy of the name of Ankush, Jain. And I first met Ankush in Dublin here at a coaching workshop that he was hosting. And since then, he's had a huge impact in the way that I approach things and in the way that I ultimately show up in the world. So, for anybody who isn't familiar with who you are, Ankush, could you give us a brief introduction to who you are and what it is you exactly do?
Yeah, so hi, thanks for having me on the show. Very privileged to be the first guest you've got on the show, and I'm sure you're going to keep growing in what you do. How do I describe myself? I guess it's different every single day, but I guess you could call me a life coach, a trainer. I'm a budding author. I've got my first book in the kind of editing phase right now. You could also call me a public speaker, that I do that from time to time. So yeah, I'm basically passionate about personal development, personal growth, and for a living, I help others have transformations in their own lives and their businesses.
Very good. I suppose to start off with, I suppose the simple question is, how does me actually being selfish actually contribute to the world? Because I used to have the misunderstanding that being selfish and taking time for myself was not a good thing to do, and it was egotistical and it wasn't right. But I've started to see it works the opposite way around, that when I'm secure in myself and I'm comfortable with what I'm doing in the world, that I can actually be of more service to the people I actually want to help in the first place. So could you explain kind of what could be happening there and what way you see things around this?
So, thanks for starting off with a nice, easy question, Dennis. So I'm guessing the reason you've asked this is because of some of the conversations we've had in the past about being more selfish. And the problem with words like selfish is they're really loaded, right? So someone might be listening to this and saying, well, why on earth are you telling people to be more selfish? That can never be a good thing. And, you're right. If you are selfish from a point of view of, being mean and horrible to people, not being very considerate, not listening to others, it's not necessarily the most effective way to go through life. I'm not even talking about morality, about right and wrong. I'm just talking about being effective. Yeah. But when I've spoken to you about being selfish, the way that I've seen it has been more about not being a doormat, or really, another way that I like to describe it is called serving yourself, right? So maybe not selfish in the way that it's been described many other times, but I think sometimes people go too far the other way. And I did this where I was really people pleasing. And I was trying to please my parents. I was trying to please, anyone that I was ever in a relationship with. I was trying to impress my friends. And I lived a very insecure life because I was always people pleasing. And what I wasn't doing is I wasn't doing what I really wanted to do. Now, I'm not talking about small things like, I don't know, helping out around the house or helping your mate move, but you want to go and watch a football match or something. I don't know. I'm talking about on a deeper level in terms of what did I really want to do with my life. My life was surrounded by or governed by what I thought I should do, how I should be. And also I had a misunderstanding that when I did things that I should do, it was like a trade-off between what I really wanted to do, and what I really wanted to do made me feel good. And what I had to do or should do was like a bit crappy and not enjoyable. And I thought part of growing up was doing more and more things that I should do, which wasn't enjoyable. And hence I didn't really enjoy growing up, right? I was still quite immature. So I would really, well, I'll just share my story, which is as I started moving more towards doing what I really wanted to do, in my heart. So, for example, that looked like maybe not doing the job that I was doing, and I was doing it because it was a good job. I had a nice company car, I had good wages and good bonuses, and I had a good career progression, and it was safe, and it meant my parents were happy with the job that I was in. But it wasn't really what I wanted to do. My heart was getting pulled towards doing coaching and helping others, but there was a lot more risk in that, right? And so when I started to be more selfish, by selfish I mean doing things that I really wanted to do, right? Not only did I enjoy my work more, but also my parents actually were more proud of me now than they were before. Now, they might have been a bit scared at the time, like, it was a risk for me to go and do that, but it was a lot better. The relationship got a lot better. They were prouder because I was doing something that I really loved to do and doing it well.
When I was listening to you there, Ankush, one thing that stood out for me was the word risk. And looking back on it in hindsight, how do you view risk now compared to when you were making the transition, when you viewed risk then? Is there any differences or?
Yeah, huge differences. Like risk is an illusion, right? And let me qualify that. A lot of the times when I used to look at something that was risky, how did I know it was risky? It was only through my own thinking, right? And so I could really sometimes over-exaggerate that in my mind. So, for example, I really wanted to have my own business for many years. And I remember like 10 years ago, my dad would said to me, if you just go out to China at the time, and there's a big fair there, he goes, just buying and selling. He goes, you could easily make $100,000 a year. You're a young guy, you're clever, this, that, and the other. And I was just like, no way, there's so much risk involved. What if I fail? Blah, blah, blah. And in hindsight, knowing what I know now, I probably wouldn't have failed. Like, I might have done, but I probably wouldn't. It's not as risky as it sounds. Yeah, my view on risk is different. Because there are a lot of things that I wouldn't do. I mean, this is just me. Some people might be the other way. So for me, I wouldn't do a lot of things because I was scared and they looked risky. And now, as I've realized that I'm experiencing risk through my own thinking, right? Like, two people can look at a situation and one person can think, oh my God, that's crazy risky. And someone else can think like, no, that's a totally acceptable level of risk, right? And why is that? It's because if they're creating that risk in their minds, it's a perception thing. And so when I started to realize risk is just a perception, I started to take it's like mentally taking a step back. I started to get more clarity around it. And, anyone listening to this, you can ask yourself, right? You can ask yourself, if there's something that you want to do but looks crazy risky, is it really that risky? Like, really, what is the actual downside? Because for me anyway, I would think something's risky and wouldn't even think about it. As opposed to, I would love to do that. Let's say I wanted to be a coach, and actually just going, all right, let's say I did do that. What are the steps that I might take? How could I minimize the risk? What could I do to more likely guarantee me success? And I really like breaking things down in small chunks, right? Because that often minimizes risk.
Yeah.
So when I started my coaching career, I didn't just go, right, I'm quitting my job and now, hey guys, I'm a coach, not knowing what the hell I was doing. I really took my time. I spent 2 years doing some real intensive training. It was almost like doing a degree again. I was away a lot from home. I was spending all of my time and energy on coaching for 2 years whilst I still had a day job. And yeah, there was a lot of work involved, especially those 2 years. It was almost, towards the end, it was like having 2 full-time jobs, right? But that minimized my risk, because if at the end of that, it still hadn't worked out, I still would have had my day job, right?
Yeah.
And my risk, my downside was the money that I'd invested in the coaching, which wasn't cheap, but it's minimizing the risk. And people have said to me, oh, why don't you just quit your job and do it? Burn your bridges. And, when I slowed down and looked at it, I'm like, that's not the most sensible option. Now, on the flip side, some people can be too risky, right?
Yeah.
And again, I used to do things without thinking about it sometimes, like they say, look before you leap. And again, that's because I had misunderstanding around how I perceived risk, right? And again, slowing down, I can't really cover this in a podcast, Dennis, but
yeah.
The work that I do, I really go deep with clients around how the mind works. Yeah. And as I understand more deeply how the mind works, and my clients understand how deeply the mind works, they're not only with risk, but everything else, their behaviors change a lot, right? So I can imagine having a client who does a lot of risky things. And when I explore that, why they're doing it, they might think, oh, when I do risky things, it makes me feel alive. Now, I know that's a misunderstanding, because that feeling of aliveness doesn't come from doing risky things or not, because there are a bunch of people who feel alive whether they do risky things or not. Similarly, some people who don't take risks might not be taking risks because they think that's keeping them safe. Again, that feeling of safety is just created in their mind. So when we start to explore that, it changes things. It changes how they interact with the world. And for me, this is not about being risky or not risky. It's about seeing how the world works so you can make more effective decisions and you can interact with the world more effectively.
Perfect. I think that it's about closing that gap between how reality actually works and how we think it works. I think you're kind of saying in a sense there. The other thing I really want to explore too, and it's something that I faced quite a bit too, was I'd feel at times that I had a solution to people's problems, and I'd feel like I need to jump in there and try and fix them. But oftentimes when I took a step back, I'd start to see that they wouldn't hear it, or sometimes I'd make things worse. So I'd like to kind of explore that, what's actually happening there, and how can I effectively help somebody when they're not listening to me? Because it can be very frustrating for people when that happens.
So my question would be, why would you want to help someone who's not listening to you?
That's a good point.
Right? Because I used to do this, I would want to try and help people. I'd want to try and change people. And there's a misunderstanding behind that, right? For me, it was a misunderstanding that if I change my parents or my siblings or my partner or something like that, then it would make my life easier, it would make my life better. And that's a misunderstanding. And so often when people they say, I want to help someone else, right? They're doing it not because they really want to help someone else. They're doing it because they think if the other person changed, it would make their life better, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, you need to get rid of that out of your head, going, really, are you doing it for them or are you doing it for you?
Yeah.
And if you're really looking to help someone else, for me, it's about saying, well, if I really want to help someone else, I can't push anything on them, right? Like imagine if someone did that to you, right? Because we've all got blind spots.
Yeah.
For someone, it's like maybe they could work out more and be healthier. Someone might be eating. Someone might be, I don't know, a million other things. And let's say someone came along, all right, and said, Dennis, do you know what the best time to sleep is at sunset every day? Right? And this has been proven. And I'm guessing you don't sleep at sunset every day and wake up before sunrise.
No, I've never had the urge to test it.
Yeah. Right? So this is a real thing. I don't do this, right? Now, if someone came along and said, hey, Dennis, this is really healthy for you and it will change your life, which is actually probably true if you started doing it.
Yeah.
But if someone tried to change you, you would naturally resist them. You'd be like, okay, yeah, it sounds good, but you know what? I don't want to do that right now. And the more they'd push you, the more you'd push back.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, a big part of being a professional coach, and I actually coach other coaches, I help coaches become more effective and build their practices, is stop trying to change people and stop trying to force transformation on others. And this is true whether you're a coach or not, right? Because it doesn't work on us and it won't work on other people.
Yeah.
So instead, I really encourage people to connect with other people, right? Listen to other people. And if they want help, then you're there. Yeah. And the crazy thing for me is, since I became a coach, none of my family were into personal development, right? My mom, dad, brother, sister. And all of them have either attended coaching or training given by other people or myself. And they wouldn't have done that. They were not interested. They were not open to this. And I was in and around personal development for a decade before I became a coach 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? And in all that time, I used to read things and see things that could really help my family and whatever. And guess what? They weren't that interested. But as I've stopped pushing and I've really allowed myself to be a role model, that's what, if you really want to help people, be a role model. You've heard this before, the number one person you can change is yourself.
Yeah.
So if you want to help anyone in your life, really make sure that you have the best life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And people will come up to you and they'll say, hey, Dennis, you're really different to how you were before. What's going on? How can I do that?
Mm-hmm.
It's not through anything else. Like over the last 9 months, I've been going to the gym, and I hadn't gone to the gym consistently for years and years and years and years. And in fact, this is probably the longest period of time I've consistently gone to the gym, and I'm in one of the best shapes of my life right now. Right? But when I started, I was saying to my dad, hey, Dad, you should go out and work out. He's got certain health problems. And he was like, yeah. But when I stuck with it and I've been consistent, and now I talk to my dad and say, hey, here are all the benefits I've experienced. He's actually now signed up with his own personal trainer.
Yeah.
Right? And the more that I keep up with it, and let's say a year down the line, I'm in even better shape. Chances are that people around me are more likely to listen, more likely to be impacted by not only who I am then, but the journey that I've gone through. Right? Because they've seen me for years and years and years not be in shape, not look after my health. Like I almost purposely ignored my health for a little while when I was first building my coaching practice, because I was like, there's too much things to do. But I've made a real conscious effort to concentrate on that. And I could be better, of course I could, but I'm taking steps towards that every single day, and it's paying dividends now. And the more the way I see it, the more I live in a way that, towards what I call excellence, I really have a desire to live a life of excellence and aspire towards excellence in all areas of my life. The more that I do that, the more that I see I inspire others. I'm not saying this as an arrogant thing. I don't mean it in that way, but I'm talking about it in terms of just really like I'm passionate about this.
Yeah. Well, you're walking the walk too, in a sense. I find myself too, when I turn it around, and what am I looking for in people? I look for people who are actually doing what they're saying. They're not saying and doing something different. They're not, as you would say, out of integrity. They're actually doing something and following up on it. But the next thing I want to do, I want to just turn this on its head too. So I'm a person who's struggling, and I want to learn something new, or I want to just even see something different, but I feel embarrassed and I feel ashamed, and I feel like I'm a special snowflake that I've got these problems and nobody else can understand me. So what would be your advice for someone like that? And maybe they're not seeing something, maybe it's something as simple as they're just not overlooking something and it's not as personal as they think it is. What would you say to that?
It's quite a general question, Dennis. So if I was talking to someone, I'd really want to know more about it. Right? I'd want to know what's going on with them. And, so it's hard for me to answer that in a generic way, because if I could hear and speak to someone very specifically, then I could answer that question more specifically and I could be more helpful. Now, having said that, I will do my best, but I wanted to kind of
the caveat,
have that caveat first.
Yep.
So, one thing I will say is that, I've worked with men for many years, and I do these powerful men's immersions, and you've attended one.
Yep.
But I've also started doing some for women, and I see actually it's not. I used to think it's very specific to men, but it's for men and women, and that is a lot of people I found don't really open up with things that they need help with. I think culturally we're not very good at asking for help. And yet I found the more I ask for help, the more I get. And it's amazing how willing people are to help you out.
Yep.
So if you're struggling with anything, I mean, this is just as a generic thing.
Yep.
If you ask people in your life for help and you're really, really willing, to listen, not defend yourself, not whatever, like, this is a great thing to do. If you've got the guts to do this, right, go up to those closest and nearest to you and say, if you could give me one piece of advice, what would it be? Listen to what they've got to say, and you're not allowed to defend yourself. The only thing you're allowed to say is thank you. It's a great little exercise for everyone, right? Now, if you do this, you will be amazed at what comes back. And it might be really good, it might be really bad, it doesn't matter, right? But from those people who know you well, there's going to be something in that.
Yeah.
There really will be something in that for you. And I've constantly looked for feedback throughout my life because I can see that can be helpful. And sometimes I don't like it, right?
Yeah.
But more often than not, it's spot on.
So what comes to mind now when you're saying this, what could help people, is what I've started to see is that things are neutral, and it's what my meaning that I put on things that actually is what I'm experiencing. And when I started to see that, it became easier for me to take on this constructive feedback and actually do something with it. So I wonder if you could just speak a little bit to how you see things and how things are out there that are neutral, and it's just my attachment to it that's making it seem more real and more kind of a problem than it is.
Yeah, and that's the real basis of a lot of what I teach. And, I do some real deep coaching with people around perception, around how they are creating their reality. And, you talked about a special little snowflake, and that's one of my sayings that, you're not a special little snowflake. And I used to think I was a special little snowflake. I used to think my problems were my problems. No one else had my problems. No one else had my family. No one else had my friends. No one else had my upbringing, my bank balance, all the other things that made my problems unique and made them so real for me, right? And there's a saying in the coaching world, which is the more personal, the more universal. The more personal, the more universal. And I really see that to be true, that when we have issues or problems that we think are really specific to us, the more specific they think they are to you, the more universal they are, right? So, and I coach guys all the time. And like I said, I've started coaching more women. There are so many similarities between what people ask for help on. Now, the surface level might look different, right? So on the surface, it might look like people are asking me different things. And yet, when I go, when I explore a little and I'm coaching them, when I go a little bit deeper, it comes out the same thing. Like, there's so many topics that come out similar, like people pleasing is a big one, and how people are living their life to please others. Yeah. Insecurity is a big topic. Now, there might be different flavors of insecurity, but it's basically insecurity that's driving a lot of people's lives, right? And with regards to insecurity, kind of money, relationships, it all kind of plays out in that. And what I really help people see is that you are not experiencing your circumstances directly. You can't. You are experiencing your circumstances and your situation and your past, right? And your projected future. All of this is experienced through your own thinking, right? If you don't have a thought about your ex, you can't experience your ex. If you don't have a thought about money, you can't experience money. It's through the mind that you create your reality, right? Now, I'm just scratching the surface. I really can't go into detail on this. As you know, my immersion events are 4 days long for a reason, because I get to go really deep. But I will just say, for the purpose of this podcast, that you are creating your reality through your thinking. And as you see that more and more, you will drop misunderstandings that you have. You will stop seeing yourself as a really little special snowflake with very personal problems that are just your problems. And this might be pissing some people off who listen to this going, well, you don't know. I don't need to know, right? And I've seen such amazing transformations, both in my clients and in other clients who are coached and trained in this kind of work. You know, really, really horrific things. And I know if it can change those people and it can change my life, it can change anyone's lives. And, you know, like there's a story, and it's on YouTube, of this girl who was, you know, raped and, you know, almost left for dead. And it was this big thing in the US, and she's passed away now. And she really thought, you know, like the shit she went through, most people could say, oh my God, yeah, that's going to totally F you up, right? Like that is not being a special little snowflake. Yeah. And yet when she had some, for her, it was, she was working with a psychiatrist, but does, you know, the same deep work that I do. She went from, you know, being in a terrible situation, terrible experience of life, through to, because her mom was interviewed about this, and her mom said she saw it as a blessing. She said, if I had to go through what I had to go through to get my experience of life right now, that was a small price to pay. Now imagine that, being brutally raped and left for dead. Like, that's pretty horrific, and I'm not wanting to play that down. And if anyone's been through that, you know, I can't even imagine what that would be through. So I'm not trying to be harsh or uncaring. But what I'm saying is that no matter, and I've never been through anything that horrific, but what I know is that deep down we are all okay. We are all complete. And no matter what's happened to you or to me or to anyone else, there's that soul, there's that part of us that no one can touch, no one can break, right? No one can ruin. And that's what I want to point people to, that yes, you might have gone through some real horrible stuff. Maybe you've gone some real tragic circumstances. And I don't want to kind of deny you that. But what I want to point people to is our experience of that is created via our thinking. And we can move on from that, and we can go back and tap into, you know, into who we really are, into our soul, like I like to call it. And when we do that, our experience of life gets better, right? It really, really, really does. And, you know, it doesn't all the time. And I'm not saying people don't have low moods or bad moments, but it can pass. And so I know no matter what's happened to anyone listening to this, that you can be okay. You can really be better than okay. You can have a fantastic experience of life despite what's happened. Now, if you don't want to and you don't believe me, that's fine. No one's going to take that away from you. And I did this. I used to relive my past over and over and over again. All my past hurts, all my past experiences that I didn't enjoy. And I would feel sad about being bullied at school, right? I would feel sad about certain things that happened, right, when I was growing up, whatever they were. And there's no, you know, I was keeping that alive through my thinking. That wasn't happening right now. And I didn't realize that I could move past it. And I see that everyone can move past it. Everyone can move past their past. Everyone can move past what's happening to them now. And we can have a much better experience of life than we currently are.
That's very powerful stuff. And it's very, I think it's, for me, my personally looking at this, it takes, it makes common sense, is that, you know, the only way to move forward is to kind of see through these misunderstandings. There's no point in living in the past. I even spent a lot of my life too living in the past, just from the simple fact that I didn't know how the mind worked. I had no understanding at all. Now I have a little bit more of an understanding, and I'm willing to drop things that I don't need to be focused on. So let's just bring it back to the happy mindset, and it's more around kind of learning a new skill. And so for staying in my own lane, I have found personally when learning a new skill that when I'm just focused on the task at hand with nothing on my mind, that I can learn more effectively. And what I had to get over initially was the fact that I'm trying to learn a new skill, but I have these fears and doubts of learning something, that if I fail or if I look stupid and I'll be embarrassed and this kind of stuff. And that was holding me back for quite a while, and I had to get over these things naturally. I was wondering if you could just speak to that, because we've already put it into perspective here, but just to bring it home, because these kind of stories for me bring home the fact that I'm overthinking things and I'm creating things that aren't as big a deal as I think they are. So if we can just apply it to me learning a new skill, I want to learn, for example, Spanish, but I feel insecure, I feel, oh, I'm making mistakes, people are laughing at me. How can I see more through the fact that I'm creating this myself rather than it being something out there and it's the Spanish people that are doing it or whatever?
Well, if I had to recommend a book, one of the books that I recommend is a book called The Little Book of Clarity by Jamie Smart. And that's a really nice introduction into the work that I do. And I believe you've read it, and kind of more than a kind of soundbite or a little answer that I give you, that's probably better. So if someone's really interested in, learning a skill and they feel insecure about it or whatever else, this is a really great book to start to understand how the mind works better, which will really help you. Now, what I will say is, as you've pointed out, right, any insecurity that you feel, you're creating it. Now, what I say to people is you don't need to manage your feelings, right? And the problem isn't that you've got a certain feeling. The problem is that you are thinking you shouldn't have that feeling, right? So I see this all the time with clients. They feel insecure and they're like, oh, I can't do anything about it. I'm feeling really insecure. I felt insecure for ages and it's not going. And the problem isn't that they felt insecure. The problem is they think they shouldn't be feeling insecure. So they're doing a lot of mental heavy lifting to try and change the feeling. Yeah. And innocently and by accident, what they're doing is they are reinforcing the feeling as opposed to letting it pass naturally, right? So if you go and give a talk and people are scared of giving talks and people laugh at you, right? It might feel uncomfortable for a little bit. But as soon as you get off the stage, as long as you don't try and do anything, that feeling will pass, right? And anyone that's listening to this, anyone that's watching this, will have moments where they've been embarrassed, they've been upset, they've been insecure. And they're not holding on to all of those feelings because, your brain would explode, right? You can't hold all of those feelings and whatever. Eventually, after a few hours, a few minutes, a few days, a few months, a few years, those feelings pass, right? So everything passes. And, I come back to a very practical thing. If you want to learn a new skill, do it step by step, take bite-sized chunks. That's a great way to learn. And along the way, you're going to feel down from time to time. You might feel demotivated. You might feel embarrassed or insecure. It's all good. Yeah. Right? Like, if you think you need to do something about it, then you're really going to hamper yourself. And I see this, I like talking about the gym because it's a kind of physical thing that people can relate to, is if you went to the gym only when you were feeling confident and good about going to the gym, you wouldn't have that much progress. If you go to the gym 3 times a week and work out properly and then eat well, you're going to see transformation. You're going to see a change in your body, right? You're going to see a change in your fitness. You don't need to manage your feelings, right? So, and people know this with the gym. If you go or any kind of exercise, if you go regardless of like, oh, I can't be asked to go today, you go anyway. When you get there, normally within 5-10 minutes, you're fine. You forget about it and you just get on with it. And so in that kind of field, a lot of people realize you don't need to fix your thinking. You don't need to fix your feelings. You don't need to feel a certain way. They just get on with it. And so it's the same with any skill or anything that you're learning. If you're learning a language, just keep taking the steps. If you say, I'm going to learn 5 words every single day of a new language, very soon you're going to have a really wide vocabulary. But if you go, oh, I don't feel like doing it today, why do I not feel like doing it? Maybe because I don't want to learn this language. You start getting into your head and start analyzing and making things up, you're going to struggle. Whereas if you're like, yeah, okay, I feel that, I feel insecure, I feel I can't be asked, it's only 5 words, let me do it anyway, and you just stick with it, that's how you make massive progress.
Exactly, because in my experience in it, it's that you're actually freeing up your thought process to concentrate on the task. You're not thinking about stuff and being distracted all the time. But one thing that comes to mind now when you're talking there is that, say for example, I've had a fight with my best friend or I've broken up with a girlfriend. How can I still concentrate on the task at hand, even though it seems like, God, this is really affecting me and I can't focus and I'm distracted and I can't knuckle down? What's happening there, and kind of gives you any advice for somebody who might be going through that right now? Or
Yeah, look, sometimes, life happens. The philosopher Sydney Banks used to say, life is a contact sport. You're going to get your knocks. That's life. And, I've been through it. You've been through it, where you have a low mood or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with feeling down. Like, this might be a strange thing to say, but I think a really big problem we have in today's culture and society is that we think there's something wrong about feeling down, about feeling sad, or about being upset. No, there's nothing wrong with it. You're just experiencing what you're experiencing. So let's say you want to, I don't know, you've broken up with a girlfriend, you're trying to do some work, you're trying to study, and you're struggling. Well, don't be too hard on yourself, right? Just know, well, I'm in a low mood today. I'm feeling a bit down today. I'm probably going to struggle doing as much study as I would do normally. And just be kind to yourself, right? And maybe go for a walk, maybe get an early night. But, it's like, I like to say, think about kids now. You might have kids, you might not have kids. I don't have kids, but I've got nieces and nephews, and I can see that if a kid's really upset or they're feeling down, you don't want to shout at them. You don't want to push them in that moment. You want to be really loving towards them and help them.
Yeah.
And often we see that with kids, but we don't see it with ourselves, right? When we're like struggling, when we're down, we can be really tough on ourselves. I know I could be, as opposed to being really loving and kind to myself and going, hey, you're just not seeing it right now, right? You're having some insecure thinking right now. You're having some upset thinking right now. That's normal. You're human, and it's okay, and it'll pass.
So what I'm hearing there is that once you're okay with yourself and you just kind of accept that today is just a day I'm going through stuff, that naturally the mind will clear, that you'll be able to make a better decision from that clarity, rather than trying to force something when you're all kind of muddled up in your thinking. It's just accept that this is life, I'm a human, and I'm affected by this, and I'll just go out and take a walk, or I'll go to bed early, or I'll just take a day off, and then we can start constructively tomorrow with a fresh day. So one last thing I was curious about, actually, when I'm listening to you, is that with your understanding of the mind, how important is the capacity to imagine and imagination in learning new things and creating your life and wanting to move forward practically even towards your goals? How important do you see imagination and our capacity to do that?
Well, I used to think that some people had more imagination than others. And I used to think some people were more creative than others. I never used to think of myself as a creative person. And as I've understood how the mind works more, I've stopped getting in my own way. And I've just allowed my creativity, I've allowed my imagination to bubble up, if you like, to reveal itself. And I used to think, you're creative if you can draw or you can sing. Yeah. And I couldn't sing, I couldn't draw, I couldn't paint. Or I wasn't very good, let me put it that way. But I see my creativity coming up in other areas, right? So my creativity comes up in my business a lot. And I really enjoy it. But I never would have thought about it. And actually, in hindsight, my creativity would come up at work, in my old job. But I didn't see that. So how important is it? I mean, it's really important and it's not important at all. It's really important because obviously it's helpful, and it's not important at all because everyone's really creative. And so when you get out of your own way and stop worrying about it, it will bubble up. But again, I think we put too much emphasis on things like confidence, creativity, self-belief, all of this stuff. These are all natural byproducts of who we are when our mind is clear, when we are operating, as we should do naturally, as we can do. And the only thing that's getting in our way is our misunderstandings about life. And then we start analyzing, we get in our heads, we've got that voice constantly talking to us, and we don't access those things that we have naturally within us.
It's funny when you're saying that too. I used to buy into this, I need to be confident, I need to be sure of myself to do something. And just even today, I'm a little nervous and stuff, and I'm just okay with that because it's a starting point. And that's actually, in hindsight, that's how I started anything. I've always been a bit nervous and a bit anxious at the start, but then I become more comfortable, and then I realized I was okay all along anyway, and it was just, that's the way it works. So my last question is, at the Happy Mindset, we're really focused around reading and a love of reading and diverse reading and pulling the patterns together. So my question would be, what's your favorite book and why?
Oh dear. I do read a lot, so my favorite book I couldn't tell you, because there's so many books and so many books that have impacted me over the years, and different books that I recommend for different things. I'll tell you I'll tell you some books that impacted me. Essentialism by Greg McKeown was a book that I read earlier this year, and it was recommended to me by another coach, and that was fantastic. So for anyone that wants to get more stuff done, wants to be more effective, and procrastinate less, Essentialism is a fantastic book, and that was probably the most impactful book this year. And then there's another book called Disruptive, which I don't know if you can get hold of anymore. I know the guy was publishing it, and I forgot the author. And that was a fantastic book around service and giving stuff away. Jonathan Keyser, I think, is the author, and he wrote a very personal story about being coached and how his life changed. And that I read a couple of years ago, and that was hugely impactful. Amazing book. I'm trying to think. Those are. I mean, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, and that really kick-started my whole journey into personal development. But funnily enough, I wouldn't recommend it now, because a lot of things that it says in the book I see very differently. Yeah. But it was impactful to me at the time. So I love the fact that you are positive about books. I love the fact that you recommend books. I give out books to clients. I give out books to immersion attendees. And I really encourage people to, if you're interested in personal growth and personal development, to read. And it's quite easy to read, if you have a good structure. And my structure, for example, is trying to read one chapter a night, or even a few pages a night. And even if you do that, you're amazed at how many books you'll get through very quickly.
So it comes back to manageable chunks and consistency again there. Yeah, perfect. This has been a very interesting conversation. I think people will get a lot from this. So if anybody's interested in actually just reaching out to you and contacting you and wanting to work with you, or just being curious about what you're doing, how would they go about doing it?
The best way is through my website. My website is ankushjain.co.uk, which is ankushjain.co.uk. And there's a contact me page, and there's some resources on there. You can sign up to my newsletter. It's a great portal to get access to me.
Perfect. So I think we're actually bang on time nearly today. So thanks again for your time, Ankush. It was a pleasure talking to you, and a pleasure knowing you so far too, and the great work that you're doing in the world. So until next time, keep having fun and enjoy the process.